My name is Miriam Ball. I work for Alternative Balance and the chief insurance officer there. So kind of the insurance programs and making sure that those fit for Alternative Balance members is my job and my specialty. I've been working in insurance for a while. And it can be kind of a dry subject, but I'm hoping we're going to make it a bit fun and easy to understand today, thanks to Lindsey's help. Alternative Balance works with an insurance broker to put these programs together. And that broker that we use is Nexo Insurance. They're amazing. They provide excellent support for us and for all of you. And so Lindsey is the director of client services there at Nexo Insurance. And so she is going to be talking about the different kinds of insurance today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsey and she can tell you more about herself and what we're going to be talking about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for being here. Really looking forward to teaching you all about insurance. Everyone's favorite topic of all time. I will attempt to not bore you on this beautiful Friday. Nexo Insurance has been working in specifically the fitness industry, but also with health and wellness and beauty in general for about 15 years. We really work on keeping our clients within that niche. So we're really good at what we do. I've been working in insurance for about 6 years now, and I know this is gonna sound weird, but I really like it. It's been a lot of fun. Our team is great, and we absolutely love working with Alternative Balance. They're absolutely wonderful people. So I'm really excited to do this with you guys today. I do have a few caveats that I just want to start off with. As an insurance broker and agent, I do not want to try to fearmonger or freak anyone out, but it's also my job to evaluate risk and try to plan for things moving forward to avoid them and be preventative. So in my examples, I might try to hammer a point home, not trying to freak you out and say that everything's going to just be disastrous for anyone's operations, but I do just want to make sure that we're all prepared for potential issues. And I will also try to provide layman's terms and not be overly technical for all of you. Insurance can be very complicated, and I'm trying to simplify that for all of you. So does anyone have any questions before I go ahead and get started? Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. Can everyone see the PowerPoint okay? Okay. So we're just going to go through the coverages and insurance items that are within the Alternative Balance program. And I also have some pre-done questions that I put together for you all at the end. If you do have any questions, just drop them in the chat and we can either pop them in and pause the presentation depending on the question, or I'll go through any remaining items at the end. But the basic main item that you're purchasing when you have an Alternative Balance policy is general liability, and that then includes other things. So what is general liability and why in the world do you need it? General liability is going to cover you for things that, in my opinion, are really just outside your control or would be categorized as negligence. So it protects your business from lawsuits filed by individuals that are not employed by you. It covers you for bodily injury and property damage that may be due to negligence. It can also fulfill landlord and lender requirements. So if you sublease space from somebody or lease a building from a landlord, if you have a loan for equipment that you've purchased and you have a lender, they will often have insurance requirements that you will need to comply with. So the most common thing that they ask for is general liability. The coverage limits that are provided within the alternative balance program are a 3 million general aggregate. Aggregate simply means annual. Really, so you have $3 million, knock on wood, to utilize and is at your disposal in the event of claims throughout your policy term, right? So if you were to have 3 $1 million claims, that would max out your aggregate limit for the year. You also have a $2 million products and completed operations aggregate, a $2 million each occurrence, so $2 million each claim. You have a $2 million claim that's going to cap out your occurrence limit. You have $300,000 for damage to rented premise and $500,000 for medical payments. I will get into the products and completed operations, damage to rented premise, and medical payments shortly. So I will go into those in a little more detail. Some general examples of how this would apply. The most common one is a slip and fall. So if someone goes into your facility and doesn't have to be a member, and they happen to trip over an electrical cord that you have set up connecting to the sound system at the facility, they trip, smash their face in, and they end up needing to go to the ER. Something like that. They can sue you for either medical payments, or anything that their lawyer and they can come up with. My favorite example of something like this, we work with a lot of fitness facilities. And a prime example of this is a non-member tripped on the curb in front of one of the gyms that we insure. They ended up face planting into the gym's front door, and they sued the landlord, the city, and the gym because there was a crack in the sidewalk. Right? I don't work in claims, so I'm pretty sure the whole thing got thrown out, but I'm not 100% sure how that ended up going. But that is a prime example of what a general liability policy would cover you for. Hopefully that doesn't ever happen to any of you, because the whole thing was a bit silly. So really it's just intended to cover you for a lot of things that are out of your control, but also potentially negligence. Maybe the sidewalk should have been under your purview and you didn't realize that there was a crack, or you really should have taped down that electrical cord and it really was your fault and they tripped. So either way, that's general liability in a nutshell.
Lindsay, can I jump in real quick with another example?
Yes.
So I've seen claims where during the winter time, somebody who had a place that they were leasing, and they didn't put salt down, right in front of their entryway, and someone slipped and hit their head on the sidewalk. And so that's something that I think maybe could be considered negligence on the insured's part, because they weren't properly taking care of the ice in front there. So that's something that might be a little bit more common in that sense, and that would be a general liability claim. Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't think of ice related incidents often, as I have none.
Right.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Perfect. Oops. So your general liability policy also has a few items that are sublimited. They may provide you with the full limit that's offered on the policy, or they'll give you a slightly lower limit, but it's still within the purview of general liability. So that includes products and completed operations. This is a standard general liability coverage However, it will not apply to a vast majority of alternative balance members' operations, but it's built in regardless. It's standard within the industry. So this is going to provide coverage for products or business operations that have been completed or abandoned, such as an item that you created, sold, and is no longer in your possession, but it still caused some sort of bodily injury or property damage. So if your business was creating, a lot of my examples are going to be fitness related, so I'm sorry. Miriam is going to hop in for a couple non-fitness related examples. But say you created some sort of workout box, like to do box jumps on, and you homemade that, sold it to a member so that they could use it at home. They utilized it at home and they ended up having an injury due to the way that you constructed it. That would be a good example of that. Miriam, do you have a non-fitness related example for that?
I think sometimes there are creams or aftercare items given with, for example, tattoo artists or permanent cosmetics, or maybe someone who got a chemical peel or a facial, and so they're sent home with aftercare items. I think that's something that would also fall under this, that if there was something that, somebody had a skin reaction, for example, once they got home and they were using that aftercare, that would be considered completed operations, products and completed operations. So
yeah, especially if it's homemade. If it's like a retail item that's like made by another well-known brand, potentially not. I think the liability might fall on that brand, but we won't get into the weeds on that. Sorry, guys. I get excited and I go too far. So another limit that you have is damage to rented premise to you. So I would like to clarify, a lot of landlords are like, oh, premise rented to you, that must mean my leased space. This is not specifically for a permanently leased location. This is more often than not for a temporarily rented space for 7 or less days. There are a couple intricacies that go within that, but in broad strokes, that is what that is meant for. So if you end up hosting some sort of expo for, maybe 100 people, that everyone goes to the expo and some sort of property damage occurs at that expo location, say a table bumps into a wall and causes a big gaping hole. That would be something that would be extended coverage to by damage to rented premise.
We have a question. Jesse might has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Could you talk a little bit more about the 7-day limit? So, for example, I run retreats at a center that I rent for less than 7 days, but I do that multiple times per year. Does there have to be some gap in between the 7-day periods? Is there a maximum per year? How does that work?
That is a really good question. I have never been asked that before. I'm not 100% sure, but my best and gut instinct would be that it would be based upon the contractual agreement that you have in place with the location. So if you have a contractual a contract with the location, saying like, hey, I'm going to be utilizing this facility in 7 day or, maybe 5-day increments for multiple times per year, then you may have the full $1 million or $2 million limit on the liability if you were to like pre-plan that. But if it's just a one-off, you would probably be sublimited to the $300,000 damage to rented premise limit. That's my gut reaction. However, I would like to dig into that a little further. Can we maybe get Jesse's email address so I can give him a full, complete answer after the fact? Sorry, Jesse, I'm not 100% sure.
No, that's totally fine. I'll put my email in the chat. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. On to personal and advertising injury, which is $1 million limit. The main thing that this is typically extended coverage for is for libel and slander. If you are saying untrue things about your potentially maybe competitors, and it ends up affecting their business somehow. If you have some sort of like privacy violation, or if you use somebody else's advertising data and plagiarize. So those items are sublimited, and would be under this particular coverage. I don't know if I've ever seen a personal and advertising injury claim personally. I think they're particularly rare. And as long as you're not stealing other people's things and using them as your own, which I would not highly recommend, I think you're going to be in the clear. Medical expenses, this is a $5,000 limit. However, we also have a participant accident policy for all alternative balance members, which I will get into a little further down the line, which is similar. But I will explain the differences in a little bit. But this extends coverage to medical or funeral expenses for bodily injury or death. So if someone were to trip over that electrical cord and they end up breaking their ankle, your coverage would extend up to $5,000 to cover their medical expenses. In some cases, it can go beyond that $5,000 limit and into the regular liability limit, but that's typically the sublimit. That said, it's a pretty standard sublimit. Also, all alternate balance members have professional liability, which in my opinion is the most important coverage any of you have. This covers you for wrongful acts due to your professional instruction, including things like breach of duty, negligence, errors and omissions, misstatements, or misleading statements. So if you are coaching a fitness class and you're telling someone to lift 300 pounds when they've never been in the gym before and they end up throwing out their back, that's bad coaching on your part. Or if you tell somebody, hey, here's this aftercare instructions for how to deal with the tattoo that I just completed on you, and you miss a whole really important section about making sure you're washing the wound prior to applying the ointment that I've told you to utilize, and it gets infected, right? That's a big omission. And so that's something that this would be extended coverage to. So you have a $2 million per occurrence and $3 million aggregate limit, which both are adequate, in my opinion, for just general alternate balance member operations. And although I don't see too many professional liability claims, it's the thing that is most important in your business. You're giving your clients guidance more often than not on what they should be doing, or just providing some sort of lead and giving them instructions to do something. And we're all human. We all make mistakes, right? Either because you did, hopefully not on purpose, but we all make errors. So it's important to make sure that we do have professional liability in place just in case, because we're not robots. Does anyone have questions about anything so far?
I have a question about a situation like if you're leading a program outdoors and somebody got Lyme disease, and like you mentioned about that there are ticks and for people to do a tick check. But how does that fall in the scheme of things?
You guys are asking such unbelievably good questions. I think that would be more considered not your fault. You can't control whether or not there are ticks in the area, especially if you advised people to do a tick check and you advised that that was a potential problem. Would someone sue you for it? Who knows? Everybody likes to sue for everything nowadays. So it would be up to a claims adjuster to handle that on your behalf. But I don't think that it would be easy to prove that that is your fault, in any capacity. So similar, example is trying to prove that you contracted COVID in a specific location. You know, when did the tick get on this person? Was it under your supervision, or was it after they left? Was it beforehand? It would be incredibly difficult to prove.
I'll jump in here and say that the defense of that, or the investigation, or, you know, representing you in that situation, I think would be part of the coverage. You know, defense costs are included in this. So, you know, if you're assigned an attorney, or, you know, the work of that claims adjuster in that situation would be something that would fall under the purview of the policy. So, you know, it's not, you wouldn't necessarily just be left high and dry in that situation, even if ultimately you were not held responsible for that.
Sorry, I did not make that clear. Thank you very much, Miriam. We're not in the habit of leaving people high and dry. Anything else? Okay.
I have a kind of a, I don't know if it's appropriate here, so I'm happy for you all to answer it, but I both have this question, and I get asked this question a lot of how is my liability, either general or professional, or my policy with alternative balance, how does that protect me differently than like having an LLC, and what are differences? So, and I don't know if, yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
from my understanding, and Miriam, please jump in if needed. Your LLC is the business entity type that you have set up for yourself with the state in order to operate. Whereas this policy is protecting that LLC from liability. But I'm not super knowledgeable on LLCs specifically, and how that protects. I mean, obviously it protects you as an individual, and it assists you in preventing your personal assets from being affected. But Miriam?
Yeah, so that's basically what it comes down to is when you have an LLC set up, that basically is separating your personal assets from your business assets. And so that's a layer of protection as far as if somebody sues you for professional services, the insurance will jump in and provide the attorney, provide support for the legal side of that. And what the LLC is doing is protecting what that person can sue for. So if they win in a judgment, what assets of yours would they be able to go after? If you have an LLC set up, that's going to protect your personal assets from being exposed as available to the person suing you for your business work. So it's kind of they're a little bit connected, but really one is focused on protecting your financial personal assets, and the other one is providing a defense for you for your services. So hopefully that helps clarify the difference there.
Yeah, I guess another little layer is just also between, and I realize it may be out of the purview of this webinar, but like when people have a sole proprietorship, and just how that, you know, like what of their insurance is going to cover stuff. And I guess it depends on people's personal assets.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, it's Anna. I'm in the DC metro area. I'm a forest bathing guide. It's good to see everybody. Sorry, I joined late. I have an interesting situation in that I have a nonprofit with a friend of mine called Capital Nature, and we have a fiscal sponsor. So we're under the umbrella of a fiscal sponsor called Green Spaces for DC. And I've been leading walks for about 3 years about 3 years now, and under the impression, hopefully rightfully so, that the insurance that we have through our 501c3 status covers me on my walks. And I've never had any claims or insurance issues or injuries, knock on wood, from anybody. But just recently I was working with a potential client and they gave me their insurance requirements, the specific numbers, like this much coverage, that much coverage. And I felt really bad because I actually had never really seen the numbers that whatever policy I'm supposedly covered under, like what those numbers are. So I reached out to the Green Spaces for DC leaders and said, hey, can you tell me what I'm covered on so that I can see if it covers it? Because in other case, if it's not, then I'm going to need to buy supplemental what do you call it, insurance. And so I guess where's my question here? I guess have you had that situation before where like it's like the a nonprofit's insurance extends to the members of the organization? Does that make sense? Like, I know that sounds kind of weird.
I think it depends on what kind of insurance the nonprofit has. Some do, some don't. If they have a policy that does cover independent contractors or employees, your insurance, if you were to sign up with Alternative Balance, that insurance covers you for your work specifically. And if you have your own business name, but a business that you own. So if their policy doesn't specifically say that it extends to you, then you would definitely want to have your own professional liability policy for your forest walks.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay. Abuse and molestation liability. This I would like to just start with is an optional coverage within the Alternative Balance program that I highly, highly recommend that everyone buy. And I'm not trying to sell you things at all. It is simply for your protection. So this coverage provides you with protection from allegations of sexual abuse and molestation, and it extends to your business, your employees, and your clients, if you do have any employees. This is a really highly litigious topic in society right now, especially post Me Too. And the thing I'd really like to hammer home is it doesn't matter what your intention was. It's all about how someone perceived what happened. And things can maybe misconstrued. If you happen to make a comment that in your mind was not inappropriate, but someone took it the wrong way. The limits that are offered by the program are $50,000 per occurrence and $100,000 aggregate. An example of this is a gym that was not a Nexo client posted pictures of some of his members on days that they were doing squats. They had all signed waivers saying that, they would be happy to have their pictures posted online. It was not an issue. However, they felt that the pictures were inappropriate and that the captions made them really uncomfortable. Specifically, they were posted on a Wednesday and it was like #hump day or like damn. And the community was really tight knit, but it still made these members feel incredibly uncomfortable. And it nearly shut the gym down. Regardless. So although there was no malicious intent, no inappropriate intent made by the gym owner, it still turned into a claim because it made people uncomfortable. And so it's just super important coverage to have. Alternative Balance does have a blog post about it if you are interested in a little more information. But those are just a couple examples of this. It's important. Also, it would provide coverage to client issues, or employee to client, or in reverse. So it doesn't necessarily matter who or what the interaction was with, as long as there was no ill intent. I know this may seem obvious, but I would like to clarify. So if there was ill or malicious intent in the action, coverage would not extend. It is intended for allegations of sexual abuse and molestation. So if someone were to do something on purpose, that doesn't count, unfortunately, in this from an insurance standpoint. Any questions? Perfect. Next is data and privacy liability. This is also an optional coverage within the Alternative Balance program. It covers things like violation of privacy laws due to your negligence. It also will extend coverage to privacy notification costs, or complying with the breach of notice law. This is offered at $100,000 per occurrence and $200,000 aggregate. An example of this is often we're going to collect some sort of personally identifiable information from our clients. Names, addresses, depending on what you're doing, a social, email address, credit card, something that's personally identifiable to them. And hackers are galore nowadays, or maybe you leave your computer open, or your computer gets stolen, and all of that information is taken by somebody, and it's used either against your business or against your clients. So that's my example for that. I know Target had a big debacle about, what is it, a decade now ago, where all of their credit card information got snagged by hackers. And if credit card information is stolen, it is because of your negligence. It is your responsibility to pay for their credit checks and monitoring their credit activity, which is about $250 a year per person, depending on how many clients you have. That adds up real quick. So just something to consider. Some of you don't collect much, or none at all, so it may not apply to you, but just something to think about.
I'm also going to jump in here real quick and mention that even if you keep paper records of your client intake forms, you know, if somebody were to see those and use that information against somebody, or it gets out, that's also something that would be covered. It doesn't necessarily have to be online. You know, online is kind of the most obvious place. But yeah, even paper documents that aren't secured properly, if they have personally identifiable information on them. And then regarding the requirements following up, if there is a breach, every state has their own requirements for what you have to do if it is determined that there was a breach. And so part of having the data and privacy liability, or cyber liability as it's called on the AB website, is that you have support from people who know what those state requirements are to make sure that you're in compliance with the response. So that's going to be a huge thing to take that off of your shoulders if this were to happen.
Super good point, especially if you live near a border or have multiple states that you work in potentially. So
yeah,
great point.
Sorry, go ahead.
Jessica, do you have a question?
Yes, I just had a question about, what about for like a software company that I use as like an EHR, or like the ability, am I responsible for if their software gets hacked?
So are you talking about like a third-party service provider that you use to collect or store data?
Yes, I have them as my main, it's HIPAA compliant. I'm a functional medicine practitioner. So it's all through, everything is through them. I don't do anything outside of that company. So their credit cards are through that for payments. The notes that I take are all in there. Like everything is through that one platform.
From my understanding, you may be held liable for that, because they're your clients. But I'm not 100% sure. Miriam, do you know, or?
Yeah, I think in that situation, if their software were to be hacked and information was leaked, I think mainly the responsibility is going to fall on them because they have certain requirements they have to follow in order to be compliant with like PCI, accepting credit card payments. They have to have a certain level of PCI compliance is what it's called. And so they have their own cyber insurance. They have their own responsibilities for that. But your responsibility in choosing that service for your clients and for your business, there is a possibility that you would be included in, a suit, or that you may be required to do some sort of follow-up with your clients because you are the business that is paying for that service. So it's kind of a two-part situation there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Of
Yeah,
course.
thank you for your question.
Make a note. Because I'm happy to dig a little deeper on that for you, Jessica. If you do want to provide Michelle your email in the chat, I'm more than happy to follow up with you on a later date.
Okay, thanks. I have reached out to them too when putting my, what I wanted to sign up as far as coverage with you guys. I had asked them, I reached out to them, and of course they wouldn't put it in writing of what they're responsible for. And I get that, but it would be helpful to know my clarity on my end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to drop your email in the chat, I'm more than happy to take a peek, and I'll get back to you probably in the middle of next week if anyone does have questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay, next is participant accident insurance. This is a coverage that is available for all alternative balance members if your policy starts March 1st of this year and on. So it'll be automatically included in your policy if you found it after that date. If not, you're going to be lucky and get it at renewal. But either way, it's available for all of our members. This provides you with coverage for medical expenses due to accidents at your facility or at your business. It is only intended for humans. So if an animal is injured, it's not necessarily intended for animals. But if someone comes into your facility and has a bodily injury claim, you are able to offer them participant accident insurance to help pay for any out-of-pocket medical expenses that they may have. So say they are at your facility and they end up tearing their ACL and they need lots of surgery and rehab in order to get that back up and running. If they have health insurance, great. If they don't, it's regardless. It's any out-of-pocket expenses that they may have in order to fix that injury. It is included with a $25,000 limit, so you can help them pay for those medical expenses up to that limit. And it really, more than anything, is it helps mitigate a liability lawsuit. So you can offer this, have goodwill with the client that was injured, and it will keep you from having to go through the whole legal system and dealing with a lawsuit, which none of us wants. It's not a good time. That also in turn will help keep your liability rates low and low for the entire alternative balance program. So really it's a community effort in that fact of if everybody utilizes this, it helps everybody in the long run. So just kind of a thing to think about from a community standpoint. Some examples of that are like the torn ACL, like I mentioned, or if someone has some sort of allergic reaction to a moisturizer that you gave them and they just totally break out in hives all over the place and need to go get some sort of medical attention for it. Or if they go into anaphylactics and need to go to the hospital, something like that would be extended coverage. It also covers way more gruesome things like death, dismemberment, and paralysis. It also includes dental coverage. So it does extend to those items as well with some supplements. But more than anything, it's more for just medical costs. The most common thing I see are just physical injuries, not teeth. Or hopefully not dismemberment, but it does have fun supplements. Like if you lose one hand, if you're interested, you can write it in the policy. Nadine, do you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned like place of work and things like this happening, but what about for those of us that basically work outside? And so like if I'm on different land, it might be private or state owned or something like that, and then also at like a retreat center.
That's totally fine. Coverage would be extended. It doesn't have to be at your business location, like a permanent location, but your business location can also be wherever you are hosting that retreat, right? Or if you are working with members at a local park, that works too. So as long as the injury occurs under the scope of your operations and you're working with them, that's when this would be able to kick in. You know, if they're on a jog by themselves and it has nothing to do with you and they twist their ankle, but they happen to be your member, this wouldn't apply. It would be, you know, when you are actively working with them. Awesome. Okay, property coverage. The property coverage in the alternative balance program is for everyone starting 7/1 and sorry. Miriam?
Sorry, yeah, 7/10 is when we actually started that.
Missed my 0, I'm so sorry. 7/10, it's gonna be automatically included with 3 different tier limits. And for anyone that didn't make that cut, you'll get it at renewal again. So similar thing, we've been trying to build out the alternative balance offerings and just kind of tacking things on as we are able to make sure that the coverage is as broad as possible. So that's why those things get tacked on after. So business personal property, this is your tangible business property, computers, equipment, any flooring that you may have put in a building that you utilize or build outs that you've done, a TV, anything business related, business property that's owned and utilized by the business. And what's going to be covered is in short, right? And there are going to be stipulations within the policy, but the main 3 things that are not included are flood, which is water rising from the ground, not water from above. So if a pipe bursts in your ceiling or if a window breaks and water comes in through that window, that's water damage. It's different. Water and sewer backup. So if your toilet breaks and water comes up from underground from that toilet, and earthquakes. Those can be purchased typically through separate policies, especially flood and earthquake. Business income. This is specifically tied to a physical property loss. I'm very sorry to tell you that if your business is shut down due to COVID, hopefully never again, but if that ever does happen due to some government shutdown, this does not apply. So business income makes you whole by helping pay for any lost revenue in the event of a partial or full shutdown of your operations. So say that window does break during a crazy storm, a ton of water comes into your facility and wrecks everything in there. You got to shut everything down. You got to rip out the flooring. You have to move to a new temporary location. all the fun things, that's when that would come into play. Not if we just have a government shutdown. Unfortunately, there's nothing that is really for that right now. Extra expense is going to be included, and it's tied to that business income. So you do have to rip out the flooring, but in order to be able to replace it, you got to dry everything out. So you rent a bunch of fans to dry out the space before you can replace the flooring. We can extra expense would cover the cost of the fan rental, or the cost of the additional space that you may need to rent while everything's getting fixed up. So this is protecting all of your physical business assets, which for a lot of you are crucial to running everything. So it's just a super important thing to consider. You know, so I gave the storm example, same thing. If, knock on wood, the whole place burns down, right? And all of your business assets are gone. You know, that's another example. We do have 3 tiers with $10,000, $25,000, and $50,000 limits. All 3 of those have just a $500 deductible. But we do have an alternative option if you do need it. It's specific for fitness facilities, but it also does offer higher limits that may be available. So if that's something that may apply to you, I would reach out to the alternative balance team.
Lindsay, we had a question about home office property. So I'm assuming that if it's used for your covered business, then if it's, you know, if you have a home office, that property would be covered as well.
Yes, it would. And in an absolute worst case scenario, our carrier and the alternative balance carrier would work with your homeowner's carrier and figure out who would be responsible for it in the worst case scenario. But this is intended for business assets, even if they are in your home. Yes. It also does include theft. So that's also a nice perk. Okay, so I'm just going to move into questions that I pre-prepared. So how do I know what types of insurance policies I need? My number one suggestion is to talk to your broker, who in this case is Alternative Balance. They are going to be able to guide you best on what it is exactly that you need, especially for those optional coverages. They are super, super knowledgeable in their products and will be able to help you navigate insurance, which is fun and complicated. If for any reason Alternative Balance isn't sure, Nexo will step in as support. Or if it's a coverage that Alternative Balance doesn't offer, Nexo is a full service brokerage and we can help supplement. And more than happy to do so. But Alternative Balance is your first touch point person on any insurance related items. And it's super important to just go over the policy coverages and how they will work and interact with your business operations. Everybody's operations are slightly different. So your needs may be different than someone who has something similar, but either way, it's just important to go over. It's also super important to go over the actual language within your policy. The numbers that are shown on the deck page and the limits that you have are not, in my opinion, an accurate description of what is offered. Yes, that's the dollar amount tied to it, but if there's a major exclusion in your policy, then you know, you're going to have to come out with that out of pocket. So actually reviewing the policy forms with your insurance broker so you don't go insane is real important, because that legalese is going to be complex. Miriam?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions, I think. Shekars, sorry if I'm not saying that correctly. Wow, what is your question?
I think you might be on mute.
Shekar? Oh, there we go. Sorry, am I saying your name correctly? Oh, still can't hear you. Do you want to maybe type it in the chat? let's, I'm so sorry, we can't hear you. If you can type your question in the chat, we'd love to get you an answer. Nadine, I see you also have your hand raised.
Thank you. The question is about, I think the right terminology is extended limits. I'm like Anna, I am from the community and population of forest therapy guides that you insure. And I have guides periodically say that the alternative balance coverage did not work for them because they are working with a particular municipality or some association or organization, usually municipal in some way, that the limits, it requires higher limits, like double the $1 million amounts that alternative balance is to offer. And is there anywhere for them to go? Anything they can purchase for that alternative balance or the parent company can provide? And then just a second question I'll drop in now is just, we also have a ton of guides in Canada that are always seeking stuff, and I don't know if there's any resource for them as well.
I'm so sorry. The program's only for US residents. If we can extend it to Canada, that would be awesome. I would love to do that, but right now it's restricted to US. That's just the easier question to answer. And then if they're based out of Canada. And then as far as higher limits, right now the program does not have the capacity to increase limits. I'm hoping to do that in the future, but that probably won't come out until sometime next year. If for any reason alternative balance member, oh, sorry, Miriam, were you going to say something? Oh, if for any reason an alternative balance member absolutely has to have higher limits, Nexo may have alternative options, but they're gonna be a bit pricier than what alternative balance has to offer. So it's something that we can potentially fix, but it would be outside of the alternative balance program altogether. And I'm trying to keep as many of you in the program as I can.
And I know for some of these people, like they've just gone elsewhere, so, and not gone with alternative balance. So I wonder what is the referral, like, will their agent, when they talk to an alternative balance, will they give them the Nexo contact information, or will they just be like, sorry, we don't have that? Because I feel like that's the answer that people have gotten before. It's not that frequent, but it's happened to a handful of people.
Yeah, our customer service department, we actually have a list of referrals that we give people when we aren't able to accommodate limits. And, or if there's a service that's outside of the range of alternative balances service offerings. So our policy is to, or our procedure, I should say, is to provide referrals that can help with those kinds of things. So if somebody hasn't gotten that, I definitely apologize for that, because that is our standard procedure to provide referral information. Nexo is our go-to referral for things. If they can't help, then they have other connections in the industry for that. But we do try and make sure that we can get people in touch with someone who can help them, because we feel really strongly that everyone should have access to the insurance they need. So yeah, we can offer some referrals for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Lindsay, you're muted.
Sorry, guys, my trash guy decided to come. If you are shopping for insurance, what are a few things to keep an eye out for? As I said before, the number one thing that you should be looking at, in my personal opinion, are the forms and endorsements. This is actually going to tell you what is included and not included in the policy. It's usually, they're all typically listed out on one page at the front. and then further described later in the policy document, but it'll at least give you broad strokes on what's included and excluded. Next are the coverage limits. Make sure that you're meeting any landlord or lender requirements, or as Nadine said, municipality requirements, depending on what you're doing. And also limits to meet your operational needs. And just to make sure they're adequate for the risk that your business presents in general. The final thing- sorry, go ahead.
One other thing about making sure you're meeting the coverage limits is that for some licenses, states will require that you have specific limits for your professional liability specifically. Most states from our research require 1 million per occurrence, 3 million aggregate. And so we meet those requirements. I think massage therapists, nutritionists, and estheticians, maybe permanent cosmetics, those are very common license types that states require a specific set of professional liability limits. So that's another thing to check. Like when you're renewing your license, if you're not sure if they have insurance requirements for your state, that's something to look into to make sure you're compliant with your state's regulations.
Wonderful point. Thank you so much. The final thing is pricing, right? Does it fit within your budget? And then weighing whether or not going over budget, but for potentially better coverage may serve you in the long run. Literally, and this again, I'm not attempting to fearmonger, but my worst case scenario in my mind is going with a cheaper policy simply because it's $100 cheaper, and then having a $500,000 claim not being covered, or even 50 grand. Right? Let's knock a zero off that. That's still going to be incredibly painful on a business finance, on a business's finance. So the out-of-pocket expense for an uncovered claim is going to significantly, more than likely, outweigh any cost savings that you may have. So obviously make sure that you are budgeting appropriately, but also make sure that you're getting what you need from a coverage standpoint. Okay, what are insurance forms and endorsements, and why are they important to review? I've mentioned this a little already, so I won't go like super heavy here, but really it's all listed on a page at the beginning of the policy typically, and it outlines all the policy forms, which will tell you what's included, and more importantly, what's excluded. So the way that this particular policy with alternative balance and a lot of general liability policies are arranged is it covers everything minus the things that are specifically excluded. So, and by everything, I should clarify and say within the purview of a general and professional liability policy or a property policy, right? So it's not going to cover outside of that, like directors and officers coverage is something totally separate, not offered in the program. I won't go into that, but like it's not going to cover something that's way outside the purview of the policy. It also may provide an exclusion, and this is why everyone loves insurance. It may say abuse and molestation is excluded, but you may be able to buy that coverage back, like in the program. So both of those abuse and molestation and data and privacy coverages that we have in the alternate balance program are excluded from the policy, but then you can buy them back. And so it's always important to consider those optional coverages so that you can fill in those gaps if you may have them or feel that they're appropriate to fill depending on your operations. And so reading the actual verbiage of the policy, or having somebody that's insurance knowledgeable read it for you so that you don't get a migraine is super important, so that you know what's actually covered and what isn't, not just the limits. And my final question is, what is risk management and why is it important for all businesses to consider? So like I briefly mentioned in my caveat at the beginning, it's super important for all businesses to try to get ahead of potential issues and think about maybe not worst case scenario, but possible scenarios that may not go well. So we're working to prevent incidents and liability issues before they ever happen. Because unfortunately, for all of us, business or personal, it's almost a matter, not a matter of if, but when a claim is going to happen for a lot of us. Hopefully that's, never going to happen, but you just don't know. And risk management will help not only mitigate your liability risk, but it then keeps your prices down, because the less liability claims that you and the whole program have, the better it is for everyone on cost savings. In the program, it's a group effort for sure. So some examples of that are having waivers in place and having everyone sign them before you work with them. Educating your client before a service starts about what the service is, what will happen if they have any questions about it. Getting verbal confirmation of what they expect and your offerings. Keeping your area clean and making sure that any cords or furniture decorations are just secured and out of the way. Because again, if someone trips over that electrical cord and sues you, you may be on the hook for that. And making sure that you have the right insurance coverages in place. Items like that, right? Just trying to think ahead. Unfortunately, today's society is super litigious and they love to sue for all sorts of fun reasons. So just trying to think about those out of the box items are super important. And if you do have any concerns about helping to mitigate your risk, Alternative Balance has a lot of great resources and their customer service team is excellent, and they will definitely be able to help you out. So I don't have any additional slides. So does anyone else have any questions from the chat that I can address?
I think Anna had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna.
Hi. So I'm just looking at the request that this one association sent me, and the question I have is, it says that the contractor shall designate the association as an additional insured, and then shall forward a certificate of insurance verifying such insurance within 7 days. So again, I've never had to deal with any of this insurance stuff before. So is that like a normal thing, like where I would have to go to somebody and be like, hey, put this company on and give me a certificate? Is that how that works?
Yeah, additional insured certificates are very, very, very common.
Okay.
For companies or individuals that have an insurable interest in your operations. So that can be a landlord, a lender, someone on whose property you will be operating, right? They want to make sure that you have insurance and that they're also going to be extended some limited coverage in the event that something happens. So additional insured certificates are things that the Alternative Balance team deals with multiple times a day, I would imagine.
And so like, am I paying, am I as a client, an AB client, I'm not yet, but am I paying like an extra fee every time that happens to have somebody put on this certificate and certificate created?
Yeah, with Alternative Balance, there's a $10 fee to add an additional insured. If they require special, a broader type of additional insured coverage, then there's an additional fee for that because there's additional responsibility placed on your insurance. If that happens, our team is really good at explaining what that means. So if you get a request, you can always send it to our team and say, I got this, what do I need? And we can definitely help you with that. You can also add an additional insured in your account on your policy at any time, 24/7. So if they need something like right away, you can go into your account, into your policy, and there's a button where you can add an additional insured. Just right there right away. But yeah, it's very common.
Thank you so much for explaining. And I apologize that I'm so clueless about this. Like, two other things listed in their little table of types of insurance is workers' compensation insurance and excess liability insurance. Automobile, I know that's me. And then there's commercial general liability. So this workers' comp and excess liability, like I don't have any employees, like, is that standard for them to ask for that kind of stuff?
If you don't have any employees, they may either want coverage for you to have for yourself, or you may be able to negotiate that with them and have them waive that requirement. I've seen that on multiple occasions, especially if it's only for you.
Got it.
Be a standard requirement that they send to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Before we run out of time, I just want to say how much I appreciate Alternative Balance. I've been with you for many years and you serve our community of guides really well, even though we still have requests. And I'm just just extending major appreciation to you all and appreciation for the website and how smoothly it works.
Oh, that's really great to hear, Nadine. Thank you so much for being a member. Yeah, we're really happy to be able to provide webinars like this and additional services to you guys. I mean, we really respect what you do. We understand what you do. You know, as I'm sure you've heard many times, our founder, you know, is a Reiki practitioner, and so she was in the industry herself, and that's kind of the base for what we do. So I'm really glad that it's working for your work. And yeah, we hope to continue providing good service to everyone.